At least 6 people were killed and 6 others were wounded after a group of gunmen fired at customers in a restaurant in Ecuador. Russian authorities announced that after almost 10 months of fighting, demining works have begun in the city of Artyomovsk following the defeat of Ukrainian forces. A large-scale assault by Israeli forces on the Balata refugee camp in Nablus resulted in the death of 3 Palestinians. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. At least 6 people were killed and 6 others were wounded after a group of gunmen fired indiscriminately at customers in a restaurant in the Ecuadorian provincial capital of Santa Elena. Police are investigating the possibility that the attack was directed against the son of a leader of an organized crime group operating in the country. This new massacre in the tourist sector of the city comes after at least 4 people were killed and 10 others wounded last Thursday when unknown assailants burst in and fired shots during the wake of a traffic officer in the city of Manta, on the coast of the South American country. Haitian asylum seekers still camping in the Giordano Bruno Square of Colonia Juarez in Mexico City resist being transferred back to Chiapas. These asylum seekers refuse to be taken back to Chiapas or to be deported by air, as already happened on Friday and Saturday, with another group who were evicted and transferred to shelters in Chiapas and Puebla, while others were taken to Felipe Ángeles International Airport to be deported. The migrants recall that they have a transit permit for 45 days, so they asked to be allowed to make their appointments with the Mexican Commission for Refugee Assistance in the hope of obtaining a permit to work in the country. The Mexican representative of the United Nations Refugee Agency expressed his concern for the transfer of these migrants without clear information or security for their access to asylum procedures. On Sunday, Colombian indigenous community members met with the nation's security forces to continue the search for the 4 missing indigenous children after a plane crash in the Amazon jungle. Yule, indigenous leaders, stated that today they are coming together with the security forces and government institutions and indigenous peoples from all the territories of the country that are opening the way and believe that the Mother Earth will allow them to find the children. The crash occurred in the early hours of May the 1st when Cessna C-206 with 7 passengers on board declared an emergency due to the engine failure. Colombian troops found the wreckage on Tuesday along with the bodies of 3 adults, the pilot, a guide, and the children's mother, but there was no sign of the youngsters.
Today we're coming together with the security forces and government institutions, and indigenous peoples from all the territories of the country are opening the way, so that it's our jungle and Mother Earth that permits us to find our children and to, of course, to deliver the message that our children will turn up.
And Cuba's National Electoral Council carried out on Sunday a dynamic test for the upcoming provincial governor and vice governor elections. The president of the National Electoral Council, Alina Balseiro, had explained recently that the exercise will simulate the voting, counting, tallying, and validation of the results. On May 28th, the majority of municipal assemblies of the People's Power of the island will be elected by free, equal, direct, and secret vote. The council also said that if the required number of officials are not reached, a new round will be held within the following 7 days. The results of the election will be processed by a system developed by the University of Computer Sciences of the Caribbean country. Tens of thousands marched on Saturday in Montevideo, Uruguay, to demand truth and justice for the 197 people who disappeared during the 1973-1985 civil-military dictatorship. The demonstrators accompanied the 28th edition of the March of Silence, carrying black and white banners, remembering the faces of the Uruguayan missing detainees. Members of the group Mothers and Relatives of Detained and Missing Uruguayans demanded on Friday that whoever had information should hand it over in order to what they called break with the culture of impunity, since progress has been slow and insufficient. Around 70 demonstrations of support were reported in different Uruguayan provinces, as well as outside the country, such as in Argentina, Chile, Spain, Sweden, France, and the United Kingdom.
And this is the way that we, the relatives of the disappeared, together with society as a whole, as a state about these crimes, because they were crimes against humanity committed by the Uruguayan state, state terrorism, and civil military coup d'etat. This is the way we have to demand memory, truth, and justice. It is extremely important because in reality we say that we are all family members because although he is my uncle, a brother, a cousin, a son, in reality he or she is a part of society that was taken from us by force and they owe the whole society a response because they took away part of our history in the most violent way possible and we still don't have an answer.
Let's take a short break. But remember, you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back. On Sunday, the U.S. Treasury warns that the deadline for raising the debt limit is June the 1st. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen warned that if the Congress does not raise the $31.4 trillion federal debt limit by early next month, the government could run out of money and be forced to default on its bills. Yellen stated that she will continue to report to the bicameral legislature, although she will not change her forecast. She also stressed that there's always uncertainty about tax revenues and expenditures, asserting that it's hard to be absolutely certain, but that their prediction is that the odds of getting to June 15th are pretty low. The Brazilian president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, called for peace in Ukraine during the G7 summit. President Lula took part in the G7 summit as a guest, marking the return of the South American country to the meeting of the group that brings together the 7 most industrialized economies in the world, as Germany, Canada, the United States, France, Italy, Japan, and the United Kingdom. During the meeting, Lula held talks with G7 leaders, but did not meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky due to conflicting agendas. During the talks, the leaders of the bloc tried to convince the Brazilian head of state of their position on the conflict in Ukraine. In this regard, Lula advocated a negotiated solution to the conflict in Ukraine with the creation of a group of countries to promote dialogue between the nations. Now we move on to other topics. The United States Defense Department announced a new shipment of arms and ammunition worth $375 million for Ukraine. In a press release following a meeting in Japan between the U.S. President Joe Biden and his Ukrainian counterpart, Volodymyr Zelensky, it was reported that the package includes additional ammunition for equipped HIMARS missile launchers, artillery rounds, anti-armored capacities, and critical material that Ukraine is using in the conflict with Russia. This is the 38th equipment delivery from the Pentagon inventories to Ukraine since August 2021. Russia has repeatedly denounced the direct involvement of the United States in the conflict in Ukraine with a constant supply of weapons. On Monday, Russian authorities announced that after almost 10 months of fighting, demining works have begun in the city of Artyomovsk following the defeat of Ukrainian forces. The announcement came from Denis Pushilin, acting head of the Donetsk People's Republic, who said areas still housing civilians should be inspected and a coordinated center will be set up to assess deliberated territories in the city when demining is completed. On May 20th, the founder of the Russian private military company Wagner, Evgeny Prigozhin, announced the seizure of Artyomovsk, also known as Bakhmut, and later the Russian Defense Ministry confirmed the news. For its part, Ukraine has not yet acknowledged it lost the city. In Greece, the center-right New Democracy Party, led by the Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis, won Sunday's parliamentary elections, but fell short of the threshold needed to form government on its own. With over 92% of the votes already counted, the Prime Minister's party managed to obtain over 40% of the votes. For its part, the left-wing opposition party of the former Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras trailed with 20% of the vote, while the leftist party PASOK and the Greek Communist Party obtained 11% and 7% of the votes respectively. The new electoral law under which the vote was held means Mitsotakis will struggle to form a government without seeking a coalition partner. In this way, Tsipras highlighted that despite the fact that the New Democracy managed to secure a victory, they still fall short from reaching an absolute majority in parliament. In Italy, a group of climate activists threw a black liquid made from charcoal into the Fontana di Trevi, one of the most emblematic sites in Rome, to protest against the use of fossil fuels. About 1,000 demonstrators entered the fountain with banners and shouting slogans such as "Our country is dying," to raise awareness among visitors about the use of hydrocarbons as an energy matrix. According to the mayor of Rome, Roberto Gualteri, the first evaluations of the monument indicate that the black paint was applied around the waterproofing material and not on the marble, so it can be cleaned without causing permanent damage. The event was part of an action promoted by the campaign Let's No Pay for Fossils. The protesters were arrested by local police and presented before the correspondent legal authorities. In France, a protest took place on Sunday during the Cannes Film Festival against the new retirement age law. Dozens of protesters gathered on the boulevard Carnot to oppose to the new reform, which raises the retirement age from 62 to 64. Demonstrators sang what has become the anthem of the retirement protest. We are here, even if Macron doesn't want us to be here, we are here, while a group repeatedly threw an effigy into the French president into the air. The protest was prevented from getting too close to the festival site by police blockades, reducing disruption to this year's event. France has been the scene of strikes and demonstrations for months, chiefly because of President Emmanuel Macron's pension reform bill, which he passed last month by using constitutional powers to circumvent opposition in parliament. It raises the retirement age to 64. And TeleSUR English continues to grow. You can now tune in from 33 different African countries using StarSat. Dial 461 and enjoy our Latin American alternative broadcast. One final short break and we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. On Monday, a large-scale assault by Israeli forces in the Balata refugee camp in Nablus resulted in the death of 3 Palestinians. The health ministry revealed the fatalities' identities: Athi Jihad Risk, 30 years old, Abdullah Youssef Abu Hamdan, 24 years old, and Mohammad Bilal Zaytun, 32 years old, in addition to 6 others seriously injured. During the raid, the shock forces stormed dozens of homes in the camp and blew up a family home, injuring a boy and a girl with shrapnel. With Monday's killings, the Israeli army accounts for at least 156 Palestinian fatal victims since the beginning of the year, 26 minors among them. In Sudan, warring factions have agreed to a 7-day ceasefire following talks in the Saudi Arabian city of Jeddah. It will take effect 48 hours after at 9:45 p.m. local time. On Monday, the sponsors of the talks, the United States and Saudi Arabia, said in their joint statement. Numerous previous ceasefire agreements have been violated. However, this agreement will be enforced by U.S., Saudi, and an international supported monitoring mechanism. The agreement also calls for distributing humanitarian humanitarian assistance, restoring essential services, and withdrawing forces from hospitals and essential public facilities.
It is a 7-day ceasefire agreement, and it will be automatically renewed until we reach a permanent ceasefire through mechanisms we will discuss in the coming days to achieve confidence between the parties and for more humanitarian services for the Sudanese citizen. This Sudanese blood is precious to you more than anyone else, and you know the importance of saving it. I hope this agreement will be a hope for the Sudanese people, especially the people of Khartoum, in which they can finish their humanitarian services in the 7 days, and hopefully it will be more.
However, in this context, new fighting broke out on Sunday in Khartoum, the capital of Sudan, after a new truce was announced as of Monday. Since the fighting began on April 15th, the parties have violated several truces brokered by Saudi Arabia and the U.S. However, Riyadh and Washington assured that contrary to the previous ceasefires, the new agreement was signed by both parties, which is why they expect it to be respected. According to sources, since the fighting began, close to 1,000 people have lost their lives and more than 1 million have fled their homes. On Sunday, Oman's Sultan Haytham bin Tariq Al Zayed arrived in Cairo for a 2-day visit. The visit is the first of its kind to Egypt since Sultan Haytham took power. In a statement, the Omani Sultanate D1 said the two leaders aim to strengthen ties and to boost cooperation in various fields. Relations between Egypt and Iran were also expected to be discussed. During the visit, the Omani-Egyptian Business Forum will be organized to showcase the investment potentials available in the Sultanate, the regulations and basic structures attractive to investors in many areas, including renewable energy and green hydrogen. Both countries will sign a number of agreements and improve economic ties, building the previous partnerships signed during the Egyptian president's visit to Oman in June 2022. They will also touch on the shared principles of their foreign policy and efforts to support the Arab region. Now we address other topics. In India, heat waves have persisted since the beginning of the year, causing significant agricultural losses and affecting the daily lives of millions. Large parts of India have experienced record temperatures of over 45 degrees Celsius this summer. For India's 1.4 billion people living in overcrowded cities without access to well-ventilated or air-conditioned housing, the heat wave means health risks, energy overload, and a decline in employment. Meanwhile, the Asian nation's agriculture is losing billions of dollars due to the resulting droughts.
Spent a lot of money on pesticides and fertilizers, but made no profits. We have worked hard, but the crop still failed as it is too hot.
In Italy, a red alert remained in place on Sunday because of the incessant rain and the possibility of landslides in the region of Emilia-Romagna, where the floods of the last few days have caused 14 deaths. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni landed in Emilia-Romagna on Sunday to visit the flooded areas after returning from the Group of 7 summit in Japan. More than 4,000 operations have been carried out by firefighters who are still working to reach towns and villages that have been cut off from highways, electricity and mobile phone service following heavy rain and flooding. About 36,000 people have been evacuated and more than 100 towns have been affected, with 622 roads closed. The flooded areas continue to be cleaned up thanks to the help of more than 1,500 volunteers from all over Italy. As the cleanup efforts continue, the number of people evacuated is decreasing. About 10,000 people who had been displaced have been able to return home. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.